I did a study, and I described that in my book, of breast cancer patients and non-breast cancer patients. And the breast cancer patients had twofold lower iodine, twofold higher bromide compared to the non-breast cancer patients. And then, when we gave them iodine, bromide came pouring out of their bodies.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today is a very special episode. In fact, I've been trying to track down this man to get him on this podcast, and we finally got him on. His name is Dr. David Brownstein, and we're going to be talking about a few very important topics. One specific topic in particular that I'm just so excited about. Now, Dr. Brownstein is a board-certified family physician. He is one of the foremost practitioners of holistic medicine and is the medical director of the Center for Holistic Medicine in West Bloomfield, Michigan. He is a proud Michigan Wolverines fan, and he has written many, many books here, really important books. He's written a book about iodine. He's written a book about holistic approach to viruses, about overcoming arthritis, overcoming thyroid disorders, ozone, salt, all sorts of gluten-free diet books, natural hormones, all sorts of really incredible books. One I definitely want to ask him about today is iodine, because I've heard him talk about iodine, and it's really phenomenal how misunderstood and how powerful this one ingredient is. So, Dr. Brownstein, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Talor.
Well, great. Let's give people just a little bit of a background. How did you get interested in the holistic medicine work you're doing today, and how did you get involved in your work around iodine and seeing the incredible benefits that it can provide for some people?
Well, I didn't start off as a holistic doctor. I started off as a conventional doctor, and even before that, I wanted to be a doctor since I was a young boy, and I grew up with a severe case of asthma. Spent a lot of time in emergency rooms, and went to my family doctor, and I was fascinated by medicine. And I did not grow up in a holistic household. We didn't take any vitamins. We didn't worry about the food we ate. We just kind of ate. And, I never really thought about, in my undergraduate training at the #1 national champs, University of Michigan Wolverines School, I never really thought about anything holistic. And when I went to med school, I never thought about anything holistic. I just thought medicine had all the answers, and I was going to learn it, and then I was going to practice it. And I always wanted to be a family doctor, model after my family doctor, since that's who I saw primarily for my asthma. And, I finished a family practice residency and began practicing conventional medicine. And I was happy. I was happy. I thought that's what I was to be doing in life, and I thought that was my calling in life. And then around 6 months into that conventional medicine practice, now I was going to buy in a partnership into this practice, and had a lawyer. We were negotiating, and I was planning at a year to be a full partner into the practice. And around 6 months into that, I started to get some uneasy feelings about what I was doing. I wasn't quite certain what this was all about, but anxiety popped up out of nowhere, and I stopped sleeping for a couple of nights. Rough sleeping for a couple of nights. And after that, I recall getting up and getting ready to go to work and telling my wife, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. Now, she was about 8 months pregnant with our first child. She'd met me at the University of Michigan National Championship School when we were 18. And, since she met me, that's all I talked about was being a physician, that it was my calling, that's what I wanted. I had nothing else, and I had no plan B. And, I hadn't said anything to her before this. And she looked at me, we had $100,000 in student loans at that time too. I was working 2 jobs to help pay that off. And she said to me, what's wrong? And I said, I'm not helping anybody. I'm not helping many. And I said, I'm prescribing all these drugs to treat the symptoms of an illness. Very few of the drugs treat the underlying cause of the illness. And I'm having to treat them with more drugs to treat the problems in the first drugs. And I said, I can't do this for the next 30 or 40 years. And she said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know, but I literally can't do this. And she said, well, why don't you just do another residency? And I said, no, one of those was enough. So I started entertaining ideas of, getting out of medicine. I mean, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And in my anxious state, I saw a patient that day when I went to work who my wife and his wife worked together in Detroit, and they, you know, drove down to Detroit. We became friendly with them and did some social things with them. And he was bothering me to meet his chiropractor. Now, at that point in my career, I never met a chiropractor. I didn't know what they did. I never knew the philosophy of chiropractic care. And I used to tell patients, don't go see chiropractors. They were dangerous, even though no clue like what they did. But that's how I was trained about chiropractors.
Mm.
And I saw him in the office that day, and he bothered me again. What he kept saying to me was, his adjustments are helpful, but it's not bad. He's doing all this nutrition and supplement stuff that really felt changed his life and turned him around. So in my anxious state and my lack of sleep, I took the chiropractor's name, which was Dr. Robert Radke. He was in Birmingham, Michigan, not too far from where I lived, and I called him up from work that day, and we set up a dinner meeting for the following Tuesday. So Tuesday rolls around. I go get home from work, and I tell Allison I'm going to cancel the meeting. I still was not sleeping great, and she said, "You can't do that. That would be rude. It's too late." And as I'm walking out the door, she told me to be nice. So I go meet Dr. Radke, and we hit it off right away. He starts talking all this biochemistry to me, functional biochemistry to me, that I had no clue what that was. But functional biochemistry is the study of biochemistry, but applying it to the patients in front of you, real world biochemistry. Now, to get to med school, you have to take a biochemistry class in undergrad. I got an A. To be in med school, you basically take the biochemistry class again. And I got an A, or comparative to what an A was in med school. And you forgot about it, right? If you took it, because it wasn't taught to you in a practical, usable manner. It was taught to you in a memorize this formula manner. And then, once you're done with the class, it just gets thrown in the back of your brain somewhere that you really never think about again, because there's really no reason to think about it to practice conventional medicine. You don't really need biochemistry or much biochemistry to practice conventional medicine. What you need to do is memorize drugs and memorize algorithms. So I'm at that dinner. Dr. Radke and I hit off a nice friendship, which we maintained for a couple of decades after that, until he passed away. And he brought me a book at that meeting. The book was Healing with Nutrition by Dr. Jonathan Wright, who's an allopathic holistic physician. I took the book home, and I was all excited that, hey, maybe there is something in medicine here. Maybe this is a better mousetrap, or in addition to the mousetrap that I was taught. So I took that book home, and I read the section on cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and I called, and the reason I read that book, I remember I read it till 1 or 2 in the morning, even though I wasn't sleeping for a good week before that. Now I woke up the next morning, I was excited, and I called my dad before I went to work, and I asked him to come in the office. I wanted to draw a couple of blood tests on him. My dad had his first heart attack at 40, his second heart attack at 42. 20 years later, he was suffering from continual angina for 20 years. Couldn't do anything. He was having chest pain and popping nitroglycerin pills like it was little candies. And we were just waiting for the call that he died. He had died. He was on 12 medications to control diabetes, blood pressure, heart disease, and high blood pressure. And he looked awful. It's all pale and pasty, and, get shortness of breath and chest pain no matter what he did. Walking around would cause it. So I called him in. I had him do the blood test, and I checked 2 blood tests on him based on what I learned from Dr. Radke and Dr. Wright. And the 2 blood tests were thyroid levels, and I drew his testosterone level. Now, no one had bothered to check anything but a TSH level at that time. I drew his inactive and active thyroid hormone levels and his antibody levels and his testosterone level. No one had bothered to check that ever. Now, he was seeing the best doctors in the area. He was getting good conventional care, but he was dying. So I get his blood work back. His testosterone levels read as below detectable limits, so near 0. His thyroid levels were in the lower part of the reference range. And I put him on 2 things, natural thyroid hormone and natural testosterone. Within 7 days, his 20-year history of angina melted away, never returned. Within 30 days, when I rechecked his blood work, his cholesterol stuck in the 300s, fell below 200 without changing any of his bad dietary habits. And my dad had a lot of bad habits, food being one of them. And he no longer looked pale and pasty. He was pink. He was not popping nitroglycerins anymore. After 7 days of that, he called me up and said, "Hey, I haven't used a nitro all day today." And he said, "I think I feel better." And I'm like, "Well, let's see how this goes." And once I saw those changes in my dad, I knew that's what I wanted to do in medicine. I went to the partners of the practice and I said, I'm not going to be a partner. I need to leave. And they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing's wrong. I just want to do a different style of medicine." They said, "What's that?" And I said, "I'm going to do holistic medicine." And they asked me, "Well, what is that?" And I said, "I don't really know, but I'm going to figure it out." And they said, "Why don't you just do it here?" I said, "No, I need an office where people answering the phones, the nurses, the file clerks, everybody in that office is all on the same page of what we're trying to accomplish in medicine." And that wasn't that office. It was going to be my office, which, that's probably a little over a 30-year-old story now, because, I'm in an office now where everybody's on the same page. The doctors are on the same page. The nurses are on the same page. The file clerks are on the same page. And the front desk people are on the same page. And it's been a good run. This is what I went into medicine for. This was my calling in medicine. This is what I found. And, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And our listeners, I think, probably all should know what the difference between traditional and holistic medicine is, because most of the guests we have on here are holistic practitioners that look for, and again, the definition there is kind of traditional medicine is kind of looking at the symptom and prescribing something, versus holistic medicine is like, what is the root cause of this problem actually, right? So that's kind of, and trying to figure out what is that root cause and how can we actually fix that holistically. So
that's a good explanation.
Great. So now I want to transition a little bit. I'm so excited to talk about iodine and some of the discoveries and some of the misconceptions around there. Can you tell us a little bit? Because again, there's like the daily value that they tell you should take is this a very, very minuscule amount. And I know you have worked with people doing much bigger doses and have seen huge, tremendous results for different things. So tell us a little bit about, how did you get interested in iodine, and how have you seen that work? And who should be really interested in this?
So after treating my dad with those two natural hormones, natural thyroid hormone and natural testosterone, I started, every patient since I realized what was happening to my dad has gotten a full hormonal, and they get a full nutritional evaluation. But I really started with bioidentical natural hormones first. And since I had my dad on natural thyroid hormone, natural testosterone, I really started learning about thyroid and the uses of testosterone. But I really focused on thyroid at first. So once in med school, you're taught to diagnose pathology. Here's the conventional medicine. Here's the conventional medicine teaching. You're taught to be an expert diagnostician and diagnose pathology. Now, once you diagnose pathology, you're taught to prescribe the one drug to treat that diagnosis. That's really conventional medicine in a nutshell. The problem is the drugs used to treat the pathology are usually they're just treating the symptoms of the illness. They're not treating the underlying cause of the illness. So like you said, it makes more sense to delve into, well, what's causing the underlying illness in the first place, deal with that. And, that's a more comprehensive, astute way of treating a patient. So, here I treat my dad with natural thyroid hormone. I start going to conferences, I start reading books, I start pulling articles, everything I can read about thyroid. In med school, I was taught that when you suspect there's a thyroid illness, now the thyroid gland sits here in the lower part of the neck. It weighs about 1.5 ounces. It produces a teaspoon of thyroid hormone for a whole year. That teaspoon of thyroid hormone has to drive the metabolic rate of every single cell in the body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year, including a leap year. And little variations in that teaspoon have big effects on the body. So a condition called hypothyroidism, or an underactive thyroid, is very common. And That's what I diagnosed my dad with. And I put him on some natural thyroid hormone, and his 20-year history of angina went away, right away. And his cholesterol fell from the 300s to below 200, which is all known to occur with treating a hypothyroid condition, because hypothyroidism can lead to heart disease, can lead to high cholesterol levels. So in med school, I was taught, if you suspect a thyroid problem or hypothyroidism, draw a TSH level. TSH is called thyroid stimulating hormone, comes from the brain, from the pituitary gland in the brain, and it comes down to the thyroid and stimulates the thyroid to make thyroid hormone, which goes through the body. And the thyroid hormone is supposed to drive that metabolic rate for everybody, keep the cholesterol lower, prevent heart disease, or even in my dad's case, perhaps treat heart disease. But it does other things. It keeps your weight in check so you don't become overweight or obese. It helps produce heat in the body so people aren't cold. Helps with hair, skin and nail problems. So I start reading all these articles on thyroid, and I start doing more comprehensive thyroid testing on people, including checking T4 and T3, the inactive and active thyroid hormone levels, as well as reverse T3 levels, as well as thyroid antibodies, and then thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins and others, just more comprehensive testing than what I was taught to do in med school. And more comprehensive testing is going to give you better data. And, it's not, that's not rocket science there. So I started, and I was checking basal body temperatures, because a low basal body temperature is a signal there's not enough thyroid hormone, not producing enough heat. People with an underactive thyroid generally, they're brain fog, they're tired, they're cold, dry skin, poor nails, poor hair. They're gaining weight that they can't control. These are bread and butter of what I've seen for 30 years practicing medicine on people. So once I started to do a more comprehensive evaluation, I started diagnosing more hypothyroid conditions. Now, conventional medicine would just check a TSH level and miss a lot of these cases. What would they put these people on who are tired, brain fogged, depressed? They'll use antidepressants. They'll use stimulants. They're using drugs that aren't treating the underlying cause of the problem, just treating the symptoms of the problem. That's why there's too many drugs in the U.S. We're using too many of these drugs that aren't treating the underlying cause of the problem. So I start diagnosing all these hypothyroid conditions, and I start putting a lot of patients on natural thyroid hormone, like I did with my dad. Now, I was doing nutrition as well. I was searching for nutrient deficiencies and using that at the same time that I'm using, hormone balancing and things. And what I found in the first 10 years of my holistic practice, that I would estimate about 75% of my patients on thyroid hormone, natural thyroid hormone, plus other natural things as well to correct nutrient deficiencies. Well, over that time period, it was bothering me. Why are so many people hypothyroid? I mean, I don't think we were designed by our maker incorrectly, and just because we're adults that we should all be, the majority of us being diagnosed with a hypothyroid condition. So I would look at the biochemistry of the thyroid gland, and you look at functional biochemistry, just as Dr. Radke taught me on that first dinner night. And so I would look at what nutrients are needed to make thyroid hormone, what nutrients are needed to activate thyroid hormone, what minerals are needed, what fatty acids are needed. And then, I would check levels on my patients for these things, or on these hypothyroid patients, I would have them try small amounts of these things that you couldn't check levels on. Well, when you look at the biochemistry of the thyroid gland, iodine comes to play. No matter what you're looking at with the thyroid, iodine's always there, front and center. The reason is the highest concentration of iodine in the body is in the thyroid gland. The iodine is an element that we can't live without. It's an essential element. We can't manufacture in our body. So either we get it from our diet, or we supplement with it, or we'll die. Now, selenium is another nutrient really important for thyroid function, just as magnesium and vitamin C and B vitamins are. And I would try these various things on people. I would try selenium. I was trying magnesium. I was trying vitamin C, and I was trying iodine. And I'd put people on small, medium, large doses. I was checking levels. Back then, there was no great iodine testing that a lab would do for you. But I was, I live in Michigan, the national champion, Michigan Wolverines, I want you to know. That's what the M is, if you didn't know that.
For those that aren't watching, he is pointing to his Michigan Wolverines logo on the shirt that he's wearing, referring to the national football champions.
The defending national football champions,
Yeah.
the winningest college football team in the history of college football. But besides that, and the best helmets and the best fight song. But besides all that, you know, I would try small, I was trying small amounts of iodine, medium, large amounts of iodine. Iodine didn't hurt anybody. Nobody got worse, but nobody got better. They were still needing thyroid hormone. I would get frustrated with iodine. Iodine's a really difficult topic to delve into. There's all these different isomers of iodine, and the literature the articles were rough to go through, and I got frustrated with it. I would try iodine and it just wasn't working. So about 10 years into this practice, I find an article in one of my journals. It was a holistic journal, and the article was about a doctor in California, Dr. Guy Abraham, who developed an iodine loading test. And he wrote a little letter to the editor. I remember it was like 2 or 3 paragraphs long. And I couldn't test iodine levels. I could test thyroid hormone levels, but I couldn't test iodine levels. I could test selenium levels. I could test vitamin C levels. Couldn't really get a grasp on how to test iodine levels. So I called him up, and that's another story. He's a very rough guy to get into I call it the circle of trust with Dr. Abraham, like Meet the Parents. Mm-hmm. And he didn't trust anybody. And I took a lot of abuse at first, but he warmed up to me because I wouldn't give up. And, he sent me some articles, and he sent me this one article that I must have read 20 times, and I couldn't understand this one graph in the article, although I knew intuitively that the information I was looking for was in this graph, but I couldn't figure out how he did it. How did he come up with this graph? And I read it and reread it. And finally I called him up and I said, "Hey, Dr. Abraham, I get the graph. I understand the whole thing now. I understand why iodine hasn't been working for me. I was using the wrong form of iodine." And he said, "It's about time. I was tired of these phone calls." And we became really good friends, very close. I would fly out to California 6 to 7 times a year to work in his lab with him. He was a mentor to me and taught me everything about iodine that I really needed to do. And once I started using the right form of iodine, which was what I was using the first 10 years was iodide, D-I-D-E, the reduced form of iodine. Once I started using iodine, I-N-E, and iodide, I-D-E, both kinds of iodine, which there's receptors all over our bodies for both forms of iodine, that's when I started to see the results, and that's what started working for me. And I went from having 3/4 of my patients on thyroid hormone the first 10 years to now having less than 1/4 of my patients on thyroid hormone, but nearly everybody's on iodine. Iodine levels have fallen over 50% across the United States from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey over the last 50 years. During that time, we've seen epidemic increases of all the thyroid disorders, autoimmune thyroid disorders, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, and thyroid cancer. And the autoimmune thyroid disorders include Graves' and Hashimoto's disease. I directly relate that epidemic rise in disease of the thyroid to the iodine deficiency epidemic that's been occurring. So, I've been using iodine successfully. I've written a book on iodine. That's you, Laura. You probably saw that, and every patient in my practice comes in, gets a full hormonal evaluation and nutritional evaluation, and they get their iodine levels evaluated. In Michigan, our soil is one of the most iodine deficient areas of the entire world. In fact, it's been known for over 100 years around the Great Lakes. Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and that fourth state starts with a lowercase o is also low in iodine. That we've beaten 3 years in a row, and we're going to beat 4 years in a row this year. So our soil is really low in iodine. If you take a chunk out of the U.S. map from the Great Lakes on down, the central United States, they're all low in iodine. But because of poor farming techniques, because of pesticides and insecticides and herbicides that contain bromine and fluoride, which are competitive inhibitors of iodine, all the country's iodine levels have fallen drastically over the last 50 years. Iodine concentrates in the glandular tissue of the body. The glands of the body include the thyroid, ovaries, uterus, breast, prostate, pancreas. What are we suffering problems in this country? We have 1 in 7 women, lifetime risk for breast cancer, 1 in 7 women, 1 in 3 men, if they live long enough, are going to have prostate cancer. We have epidemic increases of ovarian, uterine. We all know people with pancreatic cancer these days. When I was in my training, people got pancreatic cancer were drug abusers, alcoholics, you know, things like that. You know, you saw it, but you didn't see it like, you know, now we all know people, far too many people with pancreatic cancer. And I say that these thyroid cancer is the fastest growing cancer in the United States. Iodine's job in the glandular tissue is to maintain a normal architecture of the glands. I was looking for a pen. So if we call this the normal architecture of the glands, it's normal. No bumps, no lumps, you know, no growths, abnormal growths. And iodine deficiency in all the glandular tissue, first thing that happens is you get cysts growing in those tissues. Over 80% of U.S. women are thought they have fibrocystic breast disease now. Ovarian cysts are growing at epidemic rates. There's cysts in the thyroid, cysts in the pancreas, you know, cysts in the ovaries, you know, polycystic ovary disease is diagnosed all over the place these days. All this could be related to iodine deficiency. So the first thing you get is cysts. If it goes on longer, the cysts become hard and nodular. If iodine deficiency continues and you take a biopsy of the tissue, they can take a hyperplastic appearance, which is a precursor to cancer. And this is the iodine deficiency continuum. It has been shown in animal test tube in humans, and other studies in animal test tube in humans has shown that iodine not only can halt this progression, but can reverse it. And so I think that iodine's a really cool subject. Everyone, for whatever reason, everyone seems to be interested in iodine. You know, you just bring up the topic, whether it was, everyone's eyes sort of light up when you start talking about iodine. It's just, for whatever reason, it's an interesting subject. And, you know, in our country, we're paying the price for iodine levels falling over 50% across the U.S. And we're going to continue paying the price until we reverse this epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I mean, I think, you know, we've done 170 plus episodes now of this podcast, and I haven't had anyone really mention iodine, or they haven't mentioned it in detail. And even I do want to back up, because people who just heard what you said, they're probably already searching on Amazon to buy some iodine, right? But hold on a second before you do that, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. And the interesting thing is too, is if you actually go on Amazon and look for iodine, you're either going to find one of two things. One is potassium iodide, right? A lot of people don't even notice it's iodide with a DE at the end. And then, or you might find iodine, but usually, almost always, they're separate. They're separate supplements. And I think most people don't even know, well, which one do I buy? Oh, do I buy that one? Do I buy that one? No one really knows. Now, to back up and clarify what you said, the formula that you found after 10 years of struggling with getting iodine to work is a combination, a very specific formulation that is a combination of both potassium iodide and iodine. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was searching through my book to find this chart, but I'm not going to be able to find it off kilter. But, you know, all those questions can be answered in that book. And in that book, I have a chart that says, you know, which tissues of the body concentrate iodide, DIDE, the reduced form, and which tissues concentrate iodine, the oxidized form. So the thyroid primarily takes up iodide, the reduced form. The breasts take up iodine, the oxidized form, but different tissues take up different forms of iodine. So if you want a whole body effect for iodine, it's best to use a combination of iodine and iodide. What I was doing wrong in the first 10 years of my practice, I was just using iodide, IDE alone, and small, medium, large doses. It didn't work. And I can tell you iodine, the same problem occurs with iodine, INE. You need to use combinations of them. Lugol's solution is the right formula. It was made in the 1800s by Dr. Lugol's. It was the most widely used medical item until patent medicine took hold in the early 20th century. And then because Lugol's solution was so cheap and it wasn't patentable, Big Pharma and the powers that be never had any real use for it because there was no profit to be made from it. And it just lost favor and it just kind of went to the wayside. So I use Lugol's solution now, and we make our own tablet of Lugol's solution because Lugol's solution doesn't taste great and stains clothes, and you know.
So is that the Iodoral that you make? Do you guys make the Iodoral?
Iodoral was Dr. Abraham's product, and we make our own. We make our own version right now from our office.
Okay. But so iodoral is a good formula as well, or you guys make one yourself in your office, right?
So what you want to do is use a product that's a combination of iodine and iodide, and
Yep.
Lugol's in the same percentages of Lugol's. They should be making this product from Lugol solution. That's what we do. There's a few brands out there that are okay with that, but I would caution. The worst doctor out there is his or her own doctor. Better to work with a holistic practitioner who's knowledgeable about iodine and who can do the proper testing and then follow you with it. And
and that's one of the things I wanted to get into, because the truth is, when I heard the first time I heard you on a podcast, I immediately went and first I bought the first I bought the Lugol solution in its liquid form, and it tasted horrible. It just like felt weird. And so then I was reading and saw, iodoral is the tablet form of the Lugol solution. So now I can buy it in a tablet, and it's a tiny tablet, and it came in different doses. And now that's another thing that's really scary. And I'm curious to know, so I went and bought the iodoral. I bought a smaller dose one. I think it's like 6 milligram tiny capsule. I know you've gone as high as people with specific issues, right? So, and by the way, the recommended dose is like 150 micrograms, right? So even the 6 milligram tablet is what is that, like how many 1,000% of your daily value, right?
About 10 times 5, so 50 times the RDA for iodine.
50 times and so people are going to be a little afraid of that, right? Can I take that much? And and so I'm kind of wondering, even for myself, right? Hey, I want to make sure I have good iodine levels. It has all these things, prostate, everything, right? Things that I'm concerned about as well, right? So it's again, and this is a tough question, because I know, really people should be consulting with a doctor, especially if they have thyroid issues. They should consult someone like you who's really an expert in this, or maybe one of your colleagues. But is it okay for someone like myself, or someone, if someone has a family history of cancer in their family, is it wise to at least maybe take a 6 milligram tablet of iodoral? Do you see any harm in doing that?
Well, I mean, look, there's always potential harm. There's risk and benefit to everything you do in the world. Risk and benefit to crossing the street or getting out of your house. But, iodine levels have fallen 50% across the U.S. I've checked.
Yeah.
We got to be closing in on 10,000 patients between me and my partners. But over 97% are deficient in iodine, when they come to us as new patients. The only ones that aren't have usually seen my lecture or read my book, and they're taking iodine coming into the practice.
Right.
In our modern day food supply, there's just not enough iodine to saturate the receptors that are in the thyroid and the ovaries, uterus, breast, prostate, pancreas, skin, fat cells, brain. It's all over the body. And, iodine is part of the halide family in the periodic table. It's group 17. It's on the right side of the periodic table. And in that halide family is fluoride, chloride, bromide, and iodine in order of size. And I listed them, as they're listed in the periodic table. So one halide can competitively inhibit out another halide. 2 of those halides are essential. We can't live without them. We'll die. That's chloride and iodine. Chloride you find in salt, sodium chloride. 2 of the halides are toxic halides. I'll say that there's no known therapeutic value of either halide. That's bromide and fluoride. And I'll argue with you if you want to argue about cavity rates and fluoride if you want. But
I was just going to ask you a quick question. I've been using a fluoride-free toothpaste. I just use the Dr. Bronner's or whatever. But do you use fluoride-free toothpaste, and would you recommend most people do that?
Fluoride is a very small element. It's a high electronegative element, very toxic to the human body. Poisons hundreds of different enzymes. It's been associated with osteosarcoma. Of course, you should be using fluoride-free toothpaste. And most of the Western world has taken fluoride out of the water supply because they realize the risk of fluoride causing problems in the body is far outweighed by the questionable benefits of preventing cavities. Which if you look from the World Health Organization at cavity rates in all the Western countries, the cavity rates have all declined after World War II in fluoridated and non-fluoridated countries. There's really fluoride, the toxicity way outweighs the benefits. I think it should be totally taken. It should be out of our water supply. And there may be some small benefits to fluoride in people with bleeding gums or, really porous teeth to hardening up the enamel on teeth. But it's such a toxic element that, there's better ways to deal with teeth problems. But anyways,
yeah.
Too much fluoride or too much bromide will kick iodine out of the body. And it's called competitive inhibition. So when you couple this 50% decline in iodine levels across the U.S. with this excess intake of bromide and fluoride, bromide you get from food and drink. Bromide is used as a...
which food and drink have the bromide so we can avoid those?
It's in brominated vegetable oil, which the FDA just came out and said they're going to get it out of our food supply. They should have done this 30 years ago. I mean, countries knew about this 30 years ago. European Union was removed it decades ago. Only our country does this crap. And so it's in brominated vegetable oil. It's in flour. It's in a lot of bakery products. It's in it's a fire retardant. That's the word I was trying to come up with. It's a fire retardant in carpets and curtains and clothing and all these consumer goods. So it's in these things too.
Cell phones.
Our exposure to bromine has gone through the roof. Dr. Abraham and I did testing on this, and we found people severely iodine deficient and bromine toxic. And when we gave them iodine, the bromine would be competitively inhibited and come out of their body. We measured this, and I write about that in my book. Fluoride was a little different. We had a hard time measuring fluoride. Fluoride is so toxic to the body. We have been designed by our maker to bind fluoride away into our bones and our teeth. Because it's so toxic, we don't need it destroying all these enzymes in our body. So we had a hard time measuring fluoride, but we could measure bromide. And what we found was, I did a study, and I described that in my book, of breast cancer patients and non-breast cancer patients. And the breast cancer patients had twofold lower iodine, twofold higher bromide compared to the non-breast cancer patients. And then, when we gave them iodine, bromide came pouring out of their bodies.
Yeah, I highly recommend people read the book and learn more about that because, you tell some fascinating stories about that in the book as well. And so, I mean, let me rephrase the question, I guess, in a different way. Do you take iodine in the correct formulation yourself? Have you been taking it for years? And if so, like, what dose do you personally take? I'm curious.
I wouldn't take that stuff. That's toxic. No, of course I've been taking it. I have taken... So I'm not everybody's doctor out there, and I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just talking right now in general terms. I would estimate the vast majority of my patients, if they're healthy people, they're on 25 milligrams of iodine, generally. If they have glandular disease, they're on more. So is that 50? Is that 100? Is that 200? Is it 300 or 400 milligrams? Depends. Cancer patients, I use much higher doses of iodine.
And so cancer, would that be like even lung cancer too, or would it be specific to a thyroid?
Iodine concentrates in the lungs, yes. But I'm more talking glandular stuff right now since that's where iodine's focused. But yes, I do that for lung cancer. The glandular is a thyroid, ovaries, uterus, breast, prostate, pancreas.
Gotcha.
So you asked me personally, so I take 75 milligrams of iodine a day. If I'm getting sick or I'm getting, colds or whatever patients want to share with me, in my practice, I will double my iodine dose for that period of time when I feel like I'm getting sick till I'm over it, and then bring it back down to 75. Now I have taken 25 milligrams. I've taken 12 milligrams. I've taken a couple 100 milligrams. For myself, I feel better at 75 milligrams. I get more energy, and I feel like my immune system's better. When I go above that, I really can't tell a difference.
Wow. It's so interesting because like I was like, all right, let me start with the 6.5 milligram tablet of the Iodoral, to get started. I'm like, that's a nice, small, easy dose. Let me make sure nothing weird happens or whatever. And even with the 6.5 milligram one, you're like, wait a minute, this is, 3,000% or whatever we just said the number was, 30,000% of the daily value of what they're telling us. And you're kind of scared. You're like, is this too much? Am I going to, and then if I take it at night, am I going to have a burst of energy or something? All these thoughts are kind of going through my mind. But do you take it at night, by the way?
No, I take it in the morning.
In the morning. Okay. Interesting. With a meal typically?
I eat a big breakfast. So I take it with my breakfast in the morning.
Yeah. Interesting.
Iodine can
Yeah.
be taken with or without food. The absorption of it is pretty good.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, for people who are obviously, look, people who have an issue, whether it be autoimmune, thyroid, hormone, whatever it is, obviously, I highly encourage everyone always to get blood tests, but really in-depth blood tests, not just what you get for free with your yearly, medical consultation, right? Like really looking into things, especially if you have an issue. Highly recommend, you seek out someone like Dr. Brownstein and his facilities for that. Thyroid issues are running rampant right now. And so highly recommend you work with a professional. But let's say myself, I'm a healthy guy, I work out regularly, eat healthy, don't eat gluten, but I'm concerned like about just everything going on and what I have. So, I'm thinking I should at least take at least 6.5 milligram tablet, the small one every day at a minimum. My wife also, there's things that I'm thinking about
keep
there.
in mind, iodine levels have fallen over 50% across the U.S. in our food supply. And at the same time that iodine levels falling, our exposure to toxic halides, fluoride and bromide, have gone up. Those are competitive inhibitors of iodine. I think I refer to that in my book as the double whammy. It's iodine levels have fallen, plus it's being pushed out by this bromide and fluoride. So when you were worried about taking your 6.25 milligrams, the tablet of iodine, which is 1 drop of 5% Lugol's solution, one thing can happen is iodine will competitively inhibit bromide and fluoride. So sometimes people get sick from that, and they don't feel good when they take iodine. They feel brain fogged, or they feel, achy or flu-like or something like that. And what's happening with a lot of them is it's called a Herxheimer reaction, where the body's releasing bromide and fluoride, and it's overwhelming their detox systems to get it out of the body. And this is a temporary transition where you don't feel good. So in that case, I tell patients, you need more salt in your diet. Bromide toxicity was a big thing in medicine in the early 20th century, into the mid 20th century, in the later parts of 20th century, from bromine being in a bunch of a bunch of drugs. I'm old enough, I don't think you're old enough to remember bromoseltzer. Do you remember bromoseltzer?
I don't. I'm 43.
No, I got, I'm 61. But I remember bromoseltzer. It was Alka-Seltzer instead of instead of how it's made now. They put bromine in it, and people would drink this stuff. So you'd become bromine toxic, and bromine was all over the market in different food sources. It still is today. But people would show up in the emergency room with bromine toxicity, which is they'd act like they're drunk. They would be confused and falling down, and what they were treated with when they're diagnosed appropriately is with IVs of sodium chloride or salt to salt the bromine out. The chloride would competitively inhibit out bromide, and sodium would bind it so it could be released through the urine. So I frequently suggest to my patients take salt. I'm a big proponent of good salt in the body, and salt and iodine go hand in hand with one another. I never prescribe iodine dosing without salt. I think people need to take the right salt, unrefined salt with iodine. Keep them from getting problems with bromine toxicity. And the human body, the second major constituent is salt next to water. We need adequate amounts of salt. Salt's been demonized. Unfortunately, by conventional medicine, it's been demonized. And unless you have kidney problems or congestive heart failure, most people can tolerate large amounts of salt in the diet. And, you just need adequate amounts of salt in the diet. But
it's very interesting how it's like many old school doctors are still like, no, salt is bad for you. Salt leads to high blood pressure, all this kind of stuff. But now it's kind of like, the paleo community, these CrossFit guys, and now there's all these electrolytes that have like 1,000 milligrams of sodium in there, and they made it cool again. So I guess it's a good thing.
I would tell your listeners, you don't have to spend a lot of money on electrolytes. Just spend your money on salt. Buy unrefined salt. It's cheap. Put it in your water bottles.
Yep.
This has probably a teaspoon of salt in it.
Yep. I put salt in my morning water. First glass of water I drink every morning.
You don't have to buy expensive electrolyte products, and
that's right.
And there's no reason. Salt's cheap, and that's what your body needs. We were designed with salt receptors in our body, not store-bought electrolyte receptors in our body.
Right. So Celtic salt, Redmond's real salt, any of those kind of brands are good, right?
Both good salts.
Yep. Great. So yeah, this is really fascinating. So I know both myself and my wife, I'm going to get us on the salt and at least, again, even though we're healthy and, doing fine, I'm still going to personally take, some of the iodoral tablets, at least a small dose to start, I think. But I think people who have issues, thyroid can cause all sorts of issues. Like you said, weight gain, all sorts of other problems, fatigue. If you're always cold, right, that's something people should be looking into, and highly recommend that people buy your book, reach out to you. You have some amazing books. Let's tell people, where can they find you and learn more and buy your books?
So my office is in West Bloomfield, Michigan, the national championship Michigan Wolverines right here. And I've got 6 partners, and I'm not really seeing.
Do you do telemedicine
right now,
as well? If people are in other parts of the country, do you do telemedicine at all?
We don't. You have to come once.
Okay.
We need to meet you once. We
Okay.
don't. I do not like telemedicine without meeting somebody. And
Okay.
during COVID, I quickly told my office manager when she said we need to go to telemedicine. They don't want us seeing patients in the office. That lasted about an hour. 2 phone calls, 2 telemedicine calls, and I'm like, no way. It is not good medicine. I want to feel their thyroid. I want to be face to face with somebody.
Interesting.
But I treat people from all over now, once I see them, anyways.
Yeah.
So we're in West Bloomfield, Michigan. My office is Center for Holistic Medicine.com. And my website is drbrownstein.com, drbrownstein.com. And, I have 17 books. They're all available there. We had a really cool practice, really, I'm working with the best people in holistic medicine, and we're having a ball doing what we're doing. And we have a lot of energy, and, this was my calling. This is what I should be doing. This is thank Dr. Radke all the time for turning me on to functional biochemistry. And now when I see every patient, I start thinking of biochemical pathways and how you're going to optimize them and what's wrong with the pathways. What's the biochemistry of the mitochondria that's not producing enough energy for people? That's the appropriate way we should be treating our patients and thinking about our patients. Interesting.
And you mentioned hormones. Just one last question. You did mention hormones. So you are a fan of people, if someone has very, very low testosterone or other hormone imbalances, let's say for females, you are a fan of hormone, I guess it's called hormone replacement therapy. Not sure if that's the correct name for it. Yeah.
Keep in mind that you can't make a hormone in the body without iodine, without adequate amounts of iodine, because all the glands concentrate iodine, not just the thyroid, it's the adrenals, it's the ovaries, the testes. So all that needs iodine to make hormones. So sometimes getting the nutrition side of it and, detoxification side of it cleaned out, the glands will respond on their own. But when it's needed, bioidentical natural hormone therapy is a wonderful therapy. My dad, recall, I put him on natural thyroid hormone, natural testosterone. Every patient from that moment on has gotten a full hormonal and nutritional evaluation. And I find the use of bioidentical natural hormones incredibly helpful for people who need it.
Nice. One last question. I have been having concerns, like when I take the iodoral, I'm thinking, oh, can I take this? I'm taking 10 other vitamins right now at the same time. Is it going to interact with the magnesium or the vitamin C or the vitamin D in a wrong way? Is there any concern or fears about that? Or should it be taken on its own, or can it be taken with 10 other vitamins? What do you think?
There is some interaction. There's a question whether you're taking it with vitamin C. Is the vitamin C going to reduce or oxidize, really, depending on how much vitamin C you're taking, iodine. However, I don't find it that big of a deal. Iodine is pretty easily absorbed from Lugol solution, either tableted or through Lugol solution. And, if you're taking it with whatever that's maybe changing it a little bit, I can adjust my iodine dose around that. And I just tell people, just keep doing it. However you're doing it, keep doing it. I don't make that big of a deal out of taking it separate from other nutrients.
Amazing. Dr. Brownstein, I could talk with you for hours, but this has been incredibly eye-opening. I'm so happy we got to share this with my audience. And I really, really encourage people, check out his website, drbrownstein.com, just drbrownstein.com. Check out his Center for Holistic Medicine in Michigan. And thank you so much for spreading this word. And like you said, you're doing what you were meant to do. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and really commend you for all the great work you're doing and all the tens of thousands of people that you've seen and patients that you've helped over the years. And spreading this information, I'm sure, is going to help many more. So thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thanks for having me on, Talor.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.